Welcome to Uptown Radio. It's Thursdays, February 27th. I'm your host, Joya Ma. An Upper West Side elementary school is closing after more than 230 years of operation. The Alexander Robertson School is shutting down after its landlord, the Second Presbyterian Church, changed their rental agreement.
Requirements for an elementary school really required exclusive use for the school during school hours.
President Trump's March 21st deadline for the MTA to end congestion pricing is mere weeks away. Advocates say that reversing the toll could bring back higher rates of traffic-related injuries, which have slowed since the toll was instated.
You don't even know who you've helped to save by putting in something as life-saving as congestion pricing.
This and more coming up.
NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is the latest European leader to visit the White House as transatlantic ties are tested by President Trump's plan for 25% tariffs on the EU and by the U.S.'s closer relations with Russia, which 3 years ago invaded Ukraine. Trump says his talks with Starmer were tremendously productive.
The disaster in Ukraine shows exactly why it's so important for the United Kingdom and other NATO partners to make large investments in their defense capabilities. In many cases, 4% or 5% of GDP would be appropriate.
Trump did not publicly call out Russian President Vladimir Putin for ordering the invasion of Ukraine. Prime Minister Starmer said history must be on the side of the peacemaker, not the invader.
The stakes, they couldn't be higher. And we're determined to work together to deliver a good deal. We've discussed a plan today to reach a peace that is tough and fair, that Ukraine will help shape, that's backed by strength, to stop Putin coming back for more.
Tomorrow, President Trump hosts Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to apparently sign a deal that gives the U.S. access to Ukraine's rare earth minerals. Trump has also just said that tariffs on Canada and Mexico will start Tuesday. Frozen U.S. funding in foreign aid is being felt around the globe. The U.S. Agency for International Development's headquarters have been shuttered for weeks, but current and former employees were allowed back in the building for 15 minutes each to pick up their things. NPR's Michelle Kellerman has that story.
Thank you for your service. Supporters cheered as USAID staffers emerged from the Ronald Reagan building with boxes of posters and other mementos from their service. This man would not give his name because he's still employed and fears retribution.
I'm incredibly bitter and very angry, and nobody likes feeling that way, right? You know, we've sacrificed a lot. I've, spent almost 20 years working solely on Sudan and South Sudan.
He's been detained, shot at, and evacuated several times in his career and has been dismayed by the way the Trump administration talks about an agency that until now had bipartisan support. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the State Department.
U.S. House Democrats are blasting Republicans' efforts to pass a federal budget that would include making Trump's 2017 tax cuts permanent while also slashing trillions of dollars in federal funding. Here's House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries.
Hands off Social Security. Hands off Medicare, hands off Medicaid.
Congressional Republican leaders say there will not be cuts to the entitlement programs, but they cited the need to identify and eliminate inefficiencies. U.S. stocks have ended the day mixed. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closed up 296 points at 43,729. The Nasdaq was down 116 points. The S&P was down 5. From Washington, this is NPR News.
In New York, I'm ZJ Young. 2 new cases of measles were identified today in Bergen County, New Jersey. Measles can cause neurological and respiratory complications, especially for children. Symptoms can include coughing and sneezing, a high fever, runny nose, and a red rash. According to the CDC, it can take 11 to 12 days after the exposure until the first symptoms appear. Protesters gathered in Foley Square at noon and marched towards City Hall today. Participants were unhappy with Mayor Eric Adams' corruption case and his absence from a Democratic forum this Wednesday. Protesters also urged Governor Kathy Hochul to remove Adams. Hoko responded that she had no intention of doing so. Instead, she says she'll limit his powers with a series of guardrails. ICE announced today that it will open a 1,000-bed detention facility in New Jersey. The facility, Delaney Hall, is just a few miles from Newark Liberty International Airport. This will be the first ICE detention center to open under the current administration. Around 12:45 today, protesters picketed outside Barnard College's main gate on Broadway. They demanded the reversal of a decision to expel 2 Barnard students last Friday, accused by the school administration of disrupting a class titled History of Modern Israel a month ago. The weather in the city is still mild and spring-like. The rain today is expected to stop tomorrow. By Sunday, there will be sun. The weather will also drop in the next days from the 60s today to 20s to 30s at the end of this week. This is ZJ Yang, Columbia Radio News.
You may have seen posts on social media calling for an economic boycott tomorrow. If you haven't, activists are targeting large brands such as Walmart, Amazon, and Whole Foods, asking consumers not to spend money for 24 hours because they're not happy with growing financial inequality. They say if you do have to shop, support a local business. People's Union USA is a group behind the action. According to its website, it's not a political party, but a movement of people. Maurice Schweitzer is a professor at Wharton who researched the effectiveness of economic boycotts. I asked him, do they work?
Economic boycotts rarely work in general, and a one-day boycott is particularly unlikely to work. For a boycott to really work, it has to be a sustained action, and this isn't what this boycott call is, and they're very hard to sustain in general.
Since it's a one-day boycott, they're claiming they're having follow-up boycotts. Do you think if it's becoming multiple boycotts together and this action will spread all over the country?
I doubt it. What typically happens is people's attention gets pulled in many different directions, which is part of what makes boycotts difficult it makes it difficult for boycotts to succeed because people keep getting distracted by something else.
How can make these boycotts become effective?
I mean, it's almost impossible because you're calling for boycotts of very popular companies where there aren't easy substitutes. And so for example, Target and Walmart provide are things that are very accessible and very inexpensive. So you're basically asking people to undergo some real inconvenience for a sustained period of time, and most consumers aren't going to do that.
What motivates consumers to take part in boycotts like this? Does it still send a message to big businesses?
It can. Yeah, I mean, many consumers feel like they want to take some stand, take some action, and use their wallet to reflect their preferences. What they're really trying to do is get companies to change a course of action, and no company wants bad publicity. And, companies do want consumers to feel great about coming into their stores, so they care. In this case, where there are some consumers on both sides, there are some consumers that are maybe more likely to go to Target because of rolling back DEI, and many customers that are less likely to come. Overall, for a boycott to succeed, it really has to have this sustained long-term motivation, and that's difficult to enact.
On the social media, the celebrities are promoting this boycott. The question is, does it really help?
Yeah, so celebrities help. Yeah, so you want more attention, more motivation. I mean, that does help.
Mm-hmm. If the boycotts aren't that effective, what is?
What is? Well, I think community organizing. I think, when people contribute to PACs, I mean, I think media coverage, just as you're doing, is an important piece for people to understand. And
one of many executive orders signed by President Trump in January prohibits gender-affirming surgeries for people under the age of 19. The order threatened to pull federal funding for healthcare providers that do not comply with that order. Just days later, NYU Langone Health Hospital canceled gender-affirming surgeries. This morning, NYU students staged a walkout to protest the hospital's decision. Dana Binfat reports from Greenwich Village.
It's a rainy Thursday morning in Washington Square Park, but the wet weather hasn't stopped NYU students from taking over Garibaldi Square. Many are even skipping their 9 a.m. classes. Miles Manga is majoring in cinema studies at NYU. He's standing near some friends, holding up a cardboard sign that reads, when theater students miss class, it's bad.
Here at NYU, we have many community members who are trans, many community members who are immigrants. We can't stand for this. We got to protest it.
One of the things Manga and other protesters here this morning are demanding is for the university administration to release a statement asking the hospital to reverse its decision to end gender-affirming care for transgender youth.
I think it's pretty scary. I mean, there's so many words I could use. Disturbing, disheartening.
JJ Briscoe is standing nearby handing out flyers. He's a master's student in public service and also a member of Get Free, one of the 5 organizations that put on today's protest. NYU Langone has been offering gender-affirming care since 2020, and Briscoe is concerned that the country is moving backwards.
To see not only progress that's been made in the past few decades, but progress that's been made since the civil rights generation just be rolled back. Just seeing all of this work done from generations before us, they fought and died for these rights, and to watch that all just slip through our fingers, it's just, pretty terrifying. If anything, we should be headed in the other direction.
NYU Langone is under pressure from many sides. Trump's executive order threatens to withhold federal funding to hospitals like it, which continue to provide gender-affirming care. NYU receives millions in federal grants. One small example, $2 million in 2023 for half a dozen ambulances. Or a $24 million grant a few years earlier to advance COVID vaccinations and education. Trump's threat has put hospitals in a tough position as they weigh the cost to other patients who rely on these programs for care.
What do we want? No compliance. When do we want it? Now!
Near the front of the crowd, Renee Redding-Jones is holding a sign.
I'm here to support students and their right to be who they are in all the spaces that they occupy.
Are you a part of the NYU community?
I am. I'm a teacher.
United will never be defeated.
Redding-Jones is a film professor at NYU. Our conversation was interrupted as the protesters began to march towards a university building outside the park. We met up again outside the building.
We're at a really difficult time in the nation, and I'm tired of sitting at home and yelling at the TV.
And can I ask what you hope the outcome is from this today?
Well, I hope that the administration listens to the students, that there is an avenue for discussion. I hope they hear the students, allow them to express their concerns, and when they're changing policies and what have you, invite them to the table. They are the school.
When asked to comment on today's protest, a spokesman for NYU Langone Health declined. Dana Binfat, Columbia Radio News.
Congestion pricing has been in effect now for nearly 8 weeks. The Trump administration is now trying to remove the policy by March 21st. Meanwhile, collected data so far indicates that there are already a range of positive impacts in the city, including a reduction in the number of crashes, as well as fewer cyclists and pedestrian deaths. Flora Washaw has the story.
Mary Beth Kelly is the co-founder of Families for Safe Streets. She's standing on the corner of West End Avenue and 103rd Street, an intersection with a number of safety improvements that she helped lobby for. Street safety is a very personal issue for her. In 2006, her husband, a physician, was struck down by a truck.
When we were at an intersection, a truck took a fast turn and missed me, but hit him. and he died of his injuries 3 days later.
Since then, she's been a consistent advocate for improved traffic safety in the city and a consistent advocate for congestion pricing. Just this year, there has been a 55% reduction in injuries and a 51% reduction in car crashes in the congestion price zone compared to that same area last year.
That means that there are people alive right now that would have been killed.
Yeah.
Those are New Yorkers that would be dead right now. And prevention is not sexy. You don't even know who you've helped to save by putting in something as life-saving as congestion pricing.
According to the non-profit Transportation Alternatives, over 250 people were killed last year due to car crashes in New York City. And that number of fatalities has been largely consistent over the last 10 years, despite the introduction of Vision Zero in 2014. But Mary Beth explains why congestion pricing helps prevent traffic accidents.
So what you have with congestion is speeding up, slowing down, speeding up, slowing down. And in that speed up and in the road rage that goes with people feeling angry about not being able to move, there's more likely careless driving, reckless driving, distracted driving. And that's why the data shows that crashes go down, lives are saved, there are fewer injuries. Yeah, it all goes together.
Sarah Lind is co-executive director of Open Plans, a street safety advocacy group. She says that as a result of positive changes like these, many of the groups initially strongly opposed to congestion pricing have since changed their views.
Yellow cab fares within the zone have gone up. So they're not opposed. And real estate within the zone, real estate interests and business interests are all supportive of congestion pricing. I like to say, it's a good policy when you have the Real Estate Board of New York and the Democratic Socialists of New York both supporting it. This is just good policy.
Last Friday, Governor Hochul met with President Trump and discussed the fate of congestion pricing. The MTA says the fate of the policy now rests with the courts. Flora Warshaw for Uptown Radio.
You're listening to Uptown Radio. There's more to come. Stay with us. You're listening to Uptown Radio. I'm host Joya Ma. Next up, protection for marine wildlife in New York's waterways might be in danger. Congress is looking to reverse two long-standing environmental laws protecting marine animals. Also, a school on the Upper West Side is closing after more than 230 years of operation. Finally, we hear from music therapists who are worried their job might disappear due to budget cuts under the Trump administration. These stories and more coming up. A few lucky New Yorkers this month have gotten peeks into rare ocean wildlife surrounding the city. Researchers say these sightings are a promising sign that environmental protection laws have helped vulnerable marine populations grow. But as Hannah Weavers reports, Congress is trying to roll back these protections.
Tiffany Sue was chilling in the break room at her office building when she spotted something through the window in the East River. Ripples in the water that looked odd.
And I was like, wait, this is suspicious.
Do you see that?
There was a giant dolphin that just completely breached the water and jumped out there. And at that point, I'm like, guys, I just saw a dolphin, and like people around me are just pressed up against the windows, and we're trying to spot them also.
It's coming.
Where though? Oh, I see it.
Yeah.
Those dolphins have been hanging out in the area for nearly 2 weeks now. Likely a mother and calf of common dolphins. It's easy to tell because of the signature yellow stripe on their sides. But despite their name, they're not seen that often in the city's waterways. Maxine Montello is with the New York Marine Rescue Center.
My concern, East River-wise, is that kind of overlap with humans.
Like the ones steering boats in New York City's busy waters.
People are intrigued by these animals and want to get closer and get the best photo. But by doing so, you're kind of altering the animal's behavior, and it's considered kind of a term of a harassment.
Before Dutch colonists arrived, New York's waterways were full of fish, porpoises, and whales. Take humpbacks, for example. Whalers hunted them nearly to extinction, and they were endangered for many years. But their population has since recovered. Researchers say that's because of laws like the Endangered Species Act. It protects vulnerable species habitats and develops recovery plans. The Marine Mammal Protection Act is similar. It prohibits killing, capturing, or harassing marine mammals. Fines for violating the law go up to $10,000.
So if someone takes a seal home with them or someone hurts a whale, all of that can be investigated through those acts, and fines are set through that.
But both laws are now on the chopping block. Yesterday, the House Committee on Natural Resources met to evaluate them. Republican committee members argued the laws leave too much room for interpretation and give federal agencies too much power. Here's committee chair Harriet Hageman.
For far too long, this legislative body has taken the easy way out, writing vague and ambiguous laws riddled with undefined terms and broad authorities.
Montello and other researchers are adamant that these laws are vital in keeping our ecosystems balanced.
If you remove a top predator, a top trophic species, things just spiral out of control within our ecosystems, which do directly affect us.
What marine mammals eat and what they poop helps keep the oceans and us healthy. Whale excrement fertilizes phytoplankton, which is how the oceans capture a third of the planet's carbon dioxide. Hannah Weaver, Columbia Radio News.
The Alexander Robertson School is a private elementary school on the Upper West Side. It's a small school, just 60 students, and it has a long history. For over 230 years, the school has been housed in the Second Presbyterian Church. Now, that arrangement has ended. This academic year will be the school's last. Carolyn McCarthy has the story.
The Alexander Robertson School looks like a typical Upper West Side townhouse. Inside its red doors, compact classrooms are spread across 3 floors. Another space serves as a gym, auditorium, and lunchroom, often at the same time. A music room is lined with brightly colored posters, though today, it's home to a yoga class for 10 first graders who are learning downward dog.
Watermelon? Did you know that there is a puppy pose in yoga? Oh, yes, there is. Yes,
Among them is 6-year-old Sterling Jenkins.
Hello, salut, bonjour. How are you today?
After class, Sterling takes me to his favorite room in the school, a repurposed church kitchen that now serves as a science lab, its counters covered with experiments, test tubes, and fish tanks.
My favorite part about this is sometimes when we're done with our science papers, we can go and look at all the tiny fish in there. I usually see 3 or 4 a day.
Brinton Parson is Alexander Robertson's head of school, its principal and president, basically. She says that last year the school gave out nearly $1 million in scholarships.
Our student body is composed of children that would not normally be in the independent school world elsewhere. And the mission of this school, even when it was founded in 1789, the mission was to educate what they called common folk.
Since the founding of the Second Presbyterian Church, the Alexander Robertson School has been its primary mission, providing space and operating funds. But in 2020, the church decided to fiscally separate from the school, allowing the school to keep using the classrooms rent-free until 2025. Last year, they attempted to reach a new agreement and settled on rent for the school space. But the church is also renting out the schoolrooms to other groups, including a foreign language class and Alcoholics Anonymous. And that raised another major issue for the school: access and security for its young students. One day last semester, the AA group had propped open the front door to allow members in while children were still inside.
It's a security issue, and that in turn means that it's an insurance issue and a legal issue. And without exclusive use during school hours, I was not able to sign a lease.
Church officials declined to be interviewed on tape, but responded to written questions. In their statement, they said they could not meet the school's needs for exclusive use of the classrooms because they have a long-standing practice of contracting with other groups. And so, after years of negotiations, this past October, Parson announced to staff and families that the school would close, and this semester would be its last. Parson took on the responsibility of finding new educational homes for students and teachers for the 2025-2026 school year.
It was a difficult year because in record time we were trying to place 57 students instead of just our graduating class. But we had such lovely reactions from independent schools who were so sorry to see us go. I know that all of our faculty and staff have sent resumes and have had interviews, so we're all on the road to finding wonderful places for next year.
Ms. Parsons says that all students now have a school to go to next year. Those who have not yet signed contracts are exploring public school options or are on a wait list. For Columbia Radio News, I'm Caroline McCarthy.
Little Italy is famous for being a home turf of giant actors like Robert De Niro and Martin Scorsese, not for its green space, but in 2013, when a garden opened up on Elizabeth Street, longtime residents called it an oasis to Little Italy. And there's been a decade-long fight to keep Elizabeth Street Garden open. Neighbors have since butted heads with the city over a proposed affordable housing plan that is set to replace the garden. Our day reporter, Madeline Rowley, has the latest updates on the story.
Tucked into the gated space between Mott and Elizabeth Street is Elizabeth Street Garden. It's roughly 2,000 square foot park dotted with sculptures, planting, and seating areas. On rainy days, it feels like an enchanted Victorian garden in the middle of Soho in Little Italy.
The garden is a very special place in this community, and I think in New York City as well. It's a living work of art, and it brings the people that live in this community a tremendous amount of joy as well as a sense of community and bringing people together.
The garden is one of few open green spaces in Soho. For more than a decade, advocates for the garden have been battling the city with plans to build affordable housing on the site.
It's very sad that the city doesn't see the importance in this garden, see the importance of green space, not only in New York City, but particularly in this area where we really need it.
Jonathan is a volunteer at the garden and has lived in the area for over 20 years. Along with other community members, he maintains the garden, raking leaves and keeping paths clear for visitors.
You know, it's a beautiful garden in a park-like setting. You can walk in off the street, and you just relax for a few minutes before going on with your day, and that makes it a wonderful respite in an otherwise very dense neighborhood that has very little open space.
That's Janine Kelly, president of the Friends of Elizabeth Street Garden, the local organization working to preserve the space. Friends of the Garden have filed multiple lawsuits, one of which cites the Visual Arts Rights Act of 1990, a federal law that protects public works. The organization has also suggested alternative sites for the new housing. City officials were unable to be interviewed in time for the broadcast, but said the land is owned by the city and was leased for use the garden pending future development. They also say that the new housing will incorporate new publicly accessible green spaces into the design. Madeline Riley, Uptown Radio News.
President Trump's new immigration policy have created pressure and fear in New York City's migrant communities. Zijie Yang looks at one group trying to help despite facing pressure and fears of their own, music therapists.
Tracy Wan is playing a black Boston piano at the center of the room. Usually, she has a small audience, children sitting on white plastic chairs, or patients in wheelchairs. This kind of music she plays for them is soft, lively, impromptu. Wan is a music therapy student at New York Presbyterian Millstone. Wan says her role combines what a social worker and what a psychologist does. Her job is to heal people and provide well-being for them, using music they're familiar with. New York City has more than 3 million foreign-born residents. More than 200 languages are spoken here, but music can be a way to communicate across language barriers.
And I see again and again and again how it's often the music therapist who brings in the music first that creates the opportunity for trust, because they bring in music that is known and comfortable for the person from a different community, particularly our refugees.
Elizabeth Schwartz is a professor of music therapy at Molloy University on Long Island.
That it's important to recognize that we can't look at migrant communities and immigrant communities or multicultural communities as one big group. and to really respect all of the different cultures that come into the New York City area and recognize that we can bring people together through music.
But now, music therapy is under threat. The Trump administration's actions in recent weeks, including freezing federal health funds from the National Institutes of Health and potential future cuts to Medicaid, mean accessibility to therapy could greatly reduce. Danielle Crawford is a music therapist at the Brooklyn Conservatory of Music. She works with Latin communities, Black and Brown communities, neurodivergent communities, and under-resourced communities.
My advocacy for these communities has been heightened, and my need to care for, the communities I work with has definitely heightened much more.
So Crawford is educating herself.
So me just knowing the rights of my clients, knowing what rights I have as their therapist, and, being able to advocate for my clients and protect them in the best ways that I can.
Crawford says picking music is particular to individual patients.
It really depends on the music that, influences the person, that, the person or individual grew up with, or that is important to their life or their lifestyle. Music that has, helped them through life, or music that they find interesting. I really adapt and adjust to the needs and wants of my clients.
As for music therapist Elizabeth Schwartz, she'll be teaching today, but she'll also be hitting the phones. She says she calls her legislator's office every day, trying to make sure Medicaid funding isn't cut and music therapy continues. ZJ Yang, Columbia Radio News.
Well, that does it for this edition of Uptown Radio. We hope you enjoyed the show. Our foreman today was executive producer Matt Yaishi. Leading our staff of reporters was senior producer Hannah Lorenzo. Special thanks to our senior editor Una Melican and assistant editor Carolyn McCarthy. Director Flora Washaw coordinated our studio production with Hannah Weaver. Thanks to our newscaster Zijie Yang and our day reporters Dana Binfat and Madeline Riley. Our instructors Sally Herships, Bing Shapiro, and Priscilla Alabi advised our staffs. I'm your host, Joya Ma. Uptown Radio is live on Thursdays at 4. Until next time, you can always find us on uptownradio.org. From all of us here at Uptown Radio, thanks for listening.